The book of 2nd Esdras is a non-canonical book, sort of like Enoch. So if you're thinking of Esdras, you could think of Enoch. They're similar. Yet Jesus quoted this book, or at least referred to it 24 times in the Gospels and through the angel in the book of Revelation. This book is referred to more than Enoch in the New Testament, even though Esdras only has 16 chapters. These quotes include an explanation of what the narrow way is all about, why Jesus said the way was narrow, and why only a few find it. Another quote is about the stones crying out. On Palm Sunday, Jesus made this statement, but I bet 99% of Christians don't realize that this wasn't some random idea, but involves the end times, as explained by the book of 2nd Esdras. In this video, we're going to explain it. Not only does Esdras do this, but it explains the future of Daniel's fourth beast and mentions Daniel's fourth beast by name. And it tells us who it is and how it transforms from the first century to the Antichrist kingdom. This is a do not miss video series. But before we get started, I'd like to let all our regular viewers know, once again, that on Saturday, June 10th, we held our first Last Days Overcomer Conference with me, Marquis Laughlin, and Jake McCandless in Cincinnati. It was an amazing success, as everyone there learned how to overcome the collapse of everything, the stuff that's going on right now. Issues like how to overcome the fear of the end times, economic collapse, the coming one world government, AI, and how to prepare our kids and grandkids and families. We had 4 Q&A sessions, and we answered dozens of questions about all sorts of end time subjects. And even more than that, it was a wonderful time of fellowship where like-minded believers made strong and lasting bonds with other like-minded folks and figured out that they weren't the only ones seeing that the world is falling apart. And if you want to experience this for yourself, as we've been telling you, the next live in-person event is in Springfield, Arkansas, easily drivable from Texas, from Oklahoma, and from Missouri. And we're holding it on Saturday, July 29th. If you have questions, scan the QR code on the screen right now, and it will answer almost any question you have about the conference. There is a link down in the description as well. And as we've also told you, let's say Arkansas is too far for you to drive. Well, the very next week, Saturday, August 5th, we have an online version of the conference with the same teachings. Same 4 Q&A sessions, except you'll be the one online who can ask all the questions. The questions that no one is answering for you. So that's July 29th face-to-face in Springfield and August 5th online. Now let's return to Esdras. Now you're hearing this word Esdras and you say, "What? Who is this? Who is this Esdras guy?" Well, Esdras is another way of saying the scribe Ezra. The guy from the Bible who brought a number of Israelites out of Persia in 457 BC and back to Israel. Ezra is the acknowledged writer of the book of Ezra found in the Old Testament. Now, some believe Ezra didn't write the book we're studying today, and that it's only his name that was applied to it. We call these type of books pseudo-epigraphal books. So which is it? Well, we don't know. But it was Jesus himself who referred to it 24 times. So at least those portions had to have been inspired. So if it wasn't Ezra, it was someone who was inspired. As we said, Ezra led the Israelites back to Israel from Babylon in 457 BC under the reign of Artaxerxes, and most likely began the 70 weeks of Daniel with that event. So, if he was the writer, he was very important. The book is 2,500 years old then, and the Hebrew original doesn't exist anymore, but the Aramaic versions exist from 200 AD. 2nd Esdras is found in the 1611 King James Bible. Maybe you didn't know that. It's also found in the Ethiopian, Syriac, Coptic, Armenian, and Georgian Bibles. However, It's not part of the canon, and every non-canonical book must be judged by how it conforms to the 66 books of the Bible. And as you're about to see, it matches many of those sections to an amazing degree. Now, when Jesus quotes a book like Isaiah or Deuteronomy in the New Testament, he frequently says, "It is written," before the quote. He doesn't do that with any of the quotes from Esdras. So to me, that indicates it is a different type of book than Scripture. There are ideas in it that may be inspired, but not every word is inspired. This is the same kind of book as Enoch. It takes discernment to know what's inspired and what isn't. And the key is that the passages that are quoted by the true Scriptures, they're the inspired parts. And that is exactly how we are to read it. When Jesus quoted this book, he did so assuming the listeners of his day knew it and were familiar with the book. So when Jesus would refer to it, he would refer to it in passing. He wouldn't give all the details that were in the book. He wanted his listeners to go back in their minds to remember what Esdras said. And then Jesus was saying, yeah, I'm referring to this same thing. Let's give you an example. When Jesus triumphantly entered Jerusalem riding a donkey on Palm Sunday, his followers praised him and laid palm branches and their coats on the ground for Jesus to ride on. It was kind of a first century version of a red carpet. The crowd also acknowledged Jesus with a known messianic phrase, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." In other words, they were saying that Jesus was the Messiah. Upon hearing this, the Pharisees told Jesus to rebuke his disciples. They wanted Jesus to say he wasn't the Messiah, and that the disciples were wrong. Instead, Jesus said, "I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out." Luke 19:40. To our ears, this is a very strange phrase, that the stones would cry out. Scholars have suggested that the meaning of "the stones will cry out" conveys that all of creation will speak to what is true, whether we as humans acknowledge it or not. And of course, they're correct. But why stones? Why not trees? Why not the donkey speaking like it did with Balaam? The answer is what we and the scholars don't know, is that the stones crying out is a quote from 2nd Esdras. Jesus fully expected the Pharisees to know this and understand the quote. In 2nd Esdras, chapter 5, an angel gives Ezra 15 end-time signs, the 6th sign of which is that the stones will cry out. That just can't be coincidence that Jesus quoted this. In essence, he was telling the Pharisees that if humans fail to acknowledge him, the end times will begin right there and then, that the stones will cry out, a known end-time sign from 2nd Esdras. But because humans were acknowledging him at this time, it was not yet the moment for the end times to begin. Amazing, and he said all of that with just a few words by quoting in a known existing book. What is also interesting is where Jesus was located when he made this statement. He was approaching Jerusalem and the temple. So what stones in particular was Jesus saying would cry out in the end times? To me, it seems the buildings of Jerusalem. So Jesus was reinforcing that Esdras was correct, at least about the signs of stones crying out. Let's look at another very famous phrase of Jesus's, that about the narrow way. During the Sermon on the Mount, he said the following: "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." Matthew 7:13-14. And this makes sense in and of itself. However, again, what most scholars don't realize is this is referring to a much longer passage in 2nd Esdras. Jesus was assuming they knew 2nd Esdras, and so he didn't go into a lot of the extra detail. By saying what he did, he caused his listeners to recall that extra detail in Esdras. And, not surprisingly, it also has end-time meaning. Here is what Esdras says. Suppose there was a great city in a large valley, but the only entrance to it was a very narrow passage through the mountains, with fire on one side and a jagged cliff over deep waters on the left side. And this single path between these two is only wide enough for one man to enter at a time. Now, if a man was given this city for an inheritance, the only way for the heir to possess it is to go through the danger, right? 2 Esdras 7, 6 through 9. It continues, the entrance of this future age is narrow and full of sorrow and travail. There are very few, and full of pain and perils. But the future world is broad and sure and abundant with eternal fruit. Unless the living pass through tribulations and evils, they will not receive what has been stored up for them. Why have you not focused on the future instead of just the present? And that was an angel speaking to Esdras in 2 Esdras 7, 12 through 16. It should be obvious that this is the same analogy as the Matthew 7 analogy Jesus gave. However, look at all the extra detail. What is the city of our inheritance? Obviously, the New Jerusalem of Revelation 21 through 22. It is the inheritance after the return of Jesus. So the narrow way is not just exclusive. It's hard. It's full of tribulations. Jesus confirmed this in Matthew 7. None of us should be focused on the present life, but rather on our future inheritance. And if we focus on that future, the present is so much more endurable. Those not willing to walk the narrow way, they don't end up in the beautiful city, the New Jerusalem. And 2 Esdras doesn't stop there. This section keeps going on and explains in lots of detail what the end times and messianic kingdom will be like. All of this is related to the narrow way that precedes the kingdom. Let's look at what it says. For behold, the days to come, when the signs that I have foretold come to pass, and the bride is revealed, and what has been withdrawn from the earth will be brought back. Whoever is delivered from these predicted evils will see my wonders. For my Son, the Messiah, will be revealed together with those who remain, and will rejoice with those who remain 1,000 years. 2 Esdras 7, 26 through 28. So Jesus' audience that day for the Sermon on the Mount, who knew Esdras, would have linked this passage to the narrow way. When Jesus said, narrow is the way, his audience would link it to that passage. That bride will be withdrawn from the earth for a while and then returned. That's what Esdras says. And the Messiah is the Son of God, and that he and those who pass through the narrow way will rejoice for 1,000 years. The messianic kingdom, the millennial kingdom. So the narrow way has decidedly end-time connotations to it that scholars miss today because they just don't know 2 Esdras. And after this mention of the 1,000-year messianic kingdom, Esdras then describes the great white throne judgment. And you will see this sounds just like Revelation's description. The earth will give up those who sleep in her, and the dust will give up those who dwell in silence, and the secret chambers will give up the souls committed to them. 2 Esdras 7:32. Revelation puts it this way, and the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. Revelation 20:13. See, it's just about the same. Then Esdras says, the Most High will appear upon the judgment seat. Misery and long suffering will pass away, for on the day of judgment there will be sun, moon, nor stars no more. 2 Esdras 7:33. Revelation says, then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. And from his presence, earth and sky fled away. Revelation 20:11. Again, see how this is the same? In Matthew 24:22, Jesus said that unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be spared. In 2 Esdras 2:13, it says, pray those days will be shortened. Again, see how what Jesus says matches 2 Esdras. In Matthew 8:11 through 12, Jesus spoke of the millennial kingdom when he said, I tell you, many will come from the east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, when the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. In Esdras, it says this, now, brother, behold what glory, and see the people that come from the east, and unto whom I will give for leaders Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 2 Esdras 1:38. Again, see, it's the same. Esdras also speaks of the signs that Jesus said are coming. Measure carefully in your mind, and when you see that a part of the aforesaid signs are past, then understand that it is the time wherein the Most High will be to visit the world which he made. There will be earthquakes, an uproar of the nations of the earth. Then know that it is of these things that the Most High has spoken from the beginning, for everything in the world has a beginning and an end. The times of the Most High will begin with powerful signs and will end with powerful signs. Everyone who will be saved will be able to escape by his works and faith, which he has believed. He will be kept safe for the aforesaid peril and will see my salvation. 2 Esdras 9:1 through 8. Look at how similar this sounds to Luke in the Olivet Discourse, Luke 21:9 through 11 and 25 and 26. When you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must take place, but the end will not be at once. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes. And there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth distress of nations. But stay awake, at all times praying, you might escape all these things that are going to take place and stand before the Son of Man. The wording is so similar. What Esdras adds is that the return of Jesus is in the middle of the signs, not at the beginning, not at the end, but somewhere in the middle. For those favoring a pre-wrath rapture view at the sixth seal, that makes some sense. Another very interesting end-time related explanation found in 2 Esdras is what the rock cut out without human hands from Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2 is all about. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and then broke them in pieces. The stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel 2:34 through 35. In Esdras, we read this account. After all the signs I previously told you about come to pass, then will my Son be revealed, who you saw as a man coming up. When all the people hear his voice, they will leave the battle they were fighting, and that means they were fighting against each other. Those men without number will gather together to come and wage war with that man. In other words, they're going to fight against Jesus. But he will stand upon the top of Mount Zion, and Mount Zion will come, means it's not there, it's coming, and be revealed to all, prepared and built as you saw, the mountain that was cut without hands. 2 Esdras 2:13, 32 through 35. So the mountain appears to be the New Jerusalem, which is prepared in heaven and comes down as a bride. It appears from Esdras that the New Jerusalem is the heavenly Mount Zion, and it all descends. I think this is a very interesting idea and probably worthy of a video in the future. But next, we're going to examine the beginning of the birth pang period and how Jesus quoted Esdras as he presented this to the disciples. This is just too much for just this single video, so we're going to break it into a couple parts. So click right here to discover how 2 entire chapters of Esdras were the basis and explanation of the Olivet Discourse given by Jesus. If that video isn't available yet, click right here to watch a video on why the beginning of birth pangs may have already started. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there or there.